So there's a whole bunch of EDC knives besides these ones that stack up really well against the Persian 2. What it comes down to is the aesthetics and just the style. If you really like that, then the Persian 2 is going to be the knife for you. Hello my friends, Late Boy Scout here, bringing you my review of the Edc designed Spyderco Small Persian 2. One of those knives that's just, you know, if it speaks to you and the aesthetics grab you and say, buy me, then you kind of have to buy it. And that's kind of what happened with me. The Persian 2, just a beautiful knife. There are cheaper knives that have all the, all the characteristics you need or you might want, especially in the Spyderco line. There are cheaper VG10 having blades, ones with very similar blade shapes or close enough. I'm thinking of the Delica, for instance, VG10 steel for a lot less money. But again, this just offers more by way of aesthetics and cool factor. And when you just need it, you just need it. And that's what I needed, and that's why I bought this Small Persian 2. But let's talk about some of the characteristics, some of the aesthetics, some of the ergonomics and so forth of this knife, the construction. And stick around because this is going to be a pretty interesting review. We're going to compare it against a handful of other very cool knives that stack up pretty nicely against it, and also compare it to its older brother, the large or standard Persian. So this is going to be a pretty fun review. Stick around for it. Okay, some interesting things about this knife, some characteristics. It is, of course, a lockback knife. Okay, it's got that little detent in it, the David Boyd detent that Spyderco likes to put on a lot of their backlock knives. Not all, but many of them. It is, like I said before, VG10 steel and made in Japan, as many or maybe all of their VG10 steel knives are. Excellent construction coming out of Japan for any of the Spyderco knives that I've seen, and definitely trust that. Now, some interesting construction points. We've got a nice thumb ramp up here and a great little choil up here for grasping that knife up close and getting some fine detail work done, but no jimping either on the top or the bottom, and my understanding is that's just something Edc does not like to do. He likes it bare and naked and clean and slick. And in the case of this particular knife, I'm down with that. I'm just down with it. I'm totally cool with that. G10 handle scales. Pinned construction, is that correct? Yeah, it's all pinned. Now the pivot screw you can adjust, so don't be too scared of that. Out of the box, though, it's side to side, very, very tight, no noticeable wiggle at all. Front to back, none either that way. So great lockup on this excellent knife. But again, as I said, G10 scales, and how's the grippiness on this G10? Let's see. It's pretty good. We're sort of picking up a texture there. And in hand, it's a fine grit, or grit, I'm calling it grit, kind of like sandpaper, but it sort of feels like a fine grit sandpaper. But it does grip your hand pretty nicely. Over time that might get a little slicker, but it definitely does not compare at all to the cold steel G10 grip, which is just wants to grip you right back, okay? It wants to tear your skin off. That's some pretty intense stuff right there. The pocket clip on this one, not too bad. As far as how it rides, not too bad. Let's go ahead and close that and show you how that would ride. In pocket, you're looking at about that much sticking out of your pocket. Not too bad. It's a little more than, my favorite, which is going to be somewhere around that of the Sage one from Spyderco. I love how much that buries in pocket. And this one just does not bury that deeply. Just doesn't. Okay, you're going to have at least that much popping out of your pocket. If you can live with that, and I can in the case of this knife, then you're going to love it. Reversible? Nope. Nope, not at all. Edc said, this is where I want it, and that's where it's going to stay. And this is clearly a specifically designed pocket clip for this knife, which, again, if you're looking at this for its design and its aesthetics, you're going to be totally happy with that. It does have a little lanyard hole that you can stick some 550 cord through if you really feel like you want that on this knife. It's not really my thing for this particular one. What else can I say about the construction? Do we have any drilled out liners in there? Survey says yes, we do. Just barely see them in there, meaning that they went through the trouble of saving you some weight. And I would not expect less on a knife like this from Spyderco. The blade shape, of course, it's called the Persian because of the shape. It is a Persian style blade that sweeps backward like those Persian blades do, and that's very cool. And I think I got to hand it to Ed Schempp for, you know, going that route with this kind of a knife. He really does that. He goes for the sort of exotic blade shapes and exotic styles and sort of updates them with modern American technology, or blade, not necessarily American, but modern technology. So I got to hand it to him. Ed Schempp, man, that's some great work, some beautiful knives you're cranking out. Moving on, we got to talk about some of the stuff this knife can do. So I put it through what I like to call my battery of EDC tests, starting with shaving a little hair off my arm to make sure that this thing came razor sharp. VG10 holds an excellent edge, takes an amazing edge, and had no issue shaving hair. It just did just fine, did great, this knife did. Then, of course, to continue to test that sharpness, we moved on to some paper, and I felt like it zipped through that really well as well. Just an amazingly sharp knife out of the box. Wouldn't expect less from Spyderco, really. Then we went on to some paracord. Now, again, this is not real hard material to cut through, but just wanted to get a sense of how fast and how easily it zipped through that stuff, and it just was marvelous. Absolutely amazing. Very, very sharp. Moving on to what I like to think of as a pretty standard test for EDC, and that is some plastics, because we all kind of have to get into clamshell packaging these days, don't we? And almost anything we buy or have to open up, and we'll tend to use our pocket knives on that stuff. So I got into some plastic bottles that sort of simulate clamshell packaging, tore through that pretty easily. Then on to some cardboard, and I think that the Persian 2 zipped through that cardboard as fast as anything else, maybe fastest of all the other knives that I was testing that day. Man, this thing just, something about that full flat ground blade and the extremely thin, well, very, very thin, I don't know if I'd call it extreme, but a very nice, thin, fine tip. You get to the outer tip of that blade, I mean, you've just got very little material, and it's very, very sharp, and so it zips through materials like cardboard, like butter, like butter. Then, of course, moved on to probably the hardest of the materials I like to try to cut through in the EDC test, and that is some pine wood. So we did a little carving on some pine wood, digging into that material, splintering it, cutting away at it. You know, it's just kind of, at that point, it's not so much testing the edge, which it did, but it also really tested the ergonomics of the knife, because I had to dig in there pretty hard, bear down on it to cut into that pine wood the way I wanted to. And I discovered that this knife just has really good ergonomics, really nice ergonomics. I felt like it did from the beginning, but bearing down on and tearing into that pine wood definitely reaffirmed that. So some great ergonomics on the small Persian 2. Now let's go ahead and stack this knife up against some other great EDCs. The Persian 2. Let's introduce you to, how about the CRKT Moxie? Oh, that's a cool looking knife. I think it is anyway. With that awesome deployment from CRKT. Spring assist with that thumb stud. I think they call that fire safe if I'm not mistaken. I'll talk more about it when I get around to my review of this knife. And side by side, it's a little bit larger, but definitely in the EDC range. Then how about the Kershaw Leak in 14C28N steel? Oh man, I love that steel. I love this knife, and it can be had in the $50 range if I'm not mistaken. This is more in the $35, $40 range, I think. How about this one? Here's a knife I said I'd never buy, but look at that. I guess I bought it. I bought it used, so I'd save some money on it. That is the 707 sequel by Benchmade, 154cm steel, one of my top 3 favorites. Excellent. VG10, 14C28N, and 154cm being my 3 favorites right there. All represented here on the table. How about the Spyderco Persistence? An excellent knife, a good knife, I should say, at in the $35 range, something like that. At what do we have here? Oh, 8CR 13 MOV steel made in China. Again, great knife for the price. Definitely great knife. How about the Cold Steel? I think I showed this to you already. Cold Steel Mini Recon 1. Also an excellent knife, Taiwan made. Great quality on that knife. Just outstanding. And coming in at the $60+ range, 65, 68, I think it was. Then about 120 bucks for the Spyderco Sage 1 carbon fiber S30V. Excellent, excellent EDC. Love that knife. Fantastic. So there's a whole bunch of EDC knives besides these ones that stack up really well against the Persian 2. What it comes down to is the aesthetics and just the style. If you really like that, then the Persian 2 is going to be the knife for you. Now we said we'd look at the older brother, the large Persian. So here it is, on loan from my friends at Blade HQ. Thanks very much. There's the large Persian. Also a pretty cool knife, probably even more aesthetics and style than the small one. Just an exaggerated version of the knife. And one of the really cool things about Spyderco, I gotta hand it to them in a huge way. If you look at the lines, if you look at them very closely and examine them, you'll see that this is not simply a scaled down version of that. There are lines that do not match up. Look at the way that this comes out and protrudes farther out compared to this handle. Also, the top up here, you can see that there's a little slightly sharper edge at that angle right there, kind of comes in a little more abruptly than this one, which is a bit more rounded. So many things I can point out between these two knives to show you that they are not simply scaled up or scaled down versions of one another. Edc went and recontoured those lines to make a small one and to make a large one. So these are individual designs, not just, you know, smaller reproduced versions of each other. And I love that about Spyderco. That is also the case with the Endura and the Delica, and probably some other Spydercos, definitely from their Persistence and Ambitious line and Tenacious line. Again, those are not simply scaled up versions or scaled down versions of one another. They all have individual design traits. Again, excellent. It's something I need to point out because it's just a sign of excellence from Spyderco. But there again is the small Persian 2, the one that I prefer for size and weight, and the large or standard Persian 2, which, man, is going to be a great knife with VG10 steel, also made in Japan, also got that beautiful Schempp logo on it. Again, it's just a matter of preference. Do you like the larger one or do you like the smaller one? I like the smaller one myself. There are some advantages to the smaller one for carryability as well. I mentioned that this one does poke out of your pocket a little bit, and you'll see that the large will poke out of your pocket even more with the way that that kind of comes out even further. But in hand, how does that look and how does that feel? Awesome. Awesome. It does definitely come back to the video that I talked about, you know, what size is right for you, the knives I buy and why, where I talked about the EDC, EDC Plus categories, and I definitely put the small Persian 2 in the EDC category, where I would put the standard Persian 2 in the EDC Plus category, or just the collectible category, but that's all about your choice there. So that's my review, guys, of the Spyderco Small Persian 2, a fantastic knife, a beautiful knife, one that's going to have to speak to you very loudly and very clearly in order for you to pick it up, because, again, you can get some of the same steel, some of the same features in cheaper knives. But if it calls to you, I recommend you answer. I'm Blade Boy Scout. We'll see you later.